هيبقى بالطول. شربة إيثان، شربة المدور، شربة مهر الضبع، شربة المنشية، شربة النبي إلياس، شربة راس الطيري، شربة شبيب السنام، شربة الشيخ أحمد، شربة الشيخ ميسر، شربة صير، شربة عزبة، شربة عسلة، شربة راس عطية.
Hello, welcome to Big Christianity. My name is Laura, and it's really weird to be doing this by myself. Welcome to a bit of a different episode of Big Christianity today. I am here without my co-hosts because I spent some time over the weekend visiting and recording at the Gaza Solidarity encampment in Oxford, up by Oxford University students, and at a vigil for Nakba Day run by the Oxford Palestinian Solidarity campaign. What you heard in the cold open was the part of the naming of the 530 villages that were destroyed in the Nakba 76 years ago this year. And you're going to be hearing some interviews with a guy called Wilf and a girl called Amy Tess, who are both students at the encampment. They've been there for a little over a week, and they're sharing just why they're there, why it's important to be there, and some of the responses they've had. So do check them out. I hope you enjoy those. If you're listening to this episode before the 18th of May, I believe there are national demonstrations happening across the UK, probably internationally as well, marking Nakba Day. So do have a look and see if there's anything going on in your area that you could be joining in with. And as always, Free Palestine. Do keep using your voices to promote Palestine, particularly with the ongoing assault on Rafah. Use your platform and just keep praying. And keep raising awareness. So I hope you enjoy these interviews and enjoy the show.
We need to all unite, and remember, we never give up until the Palestine is free.
Hello, this is Laura reporting live from the streets of Oxford. So I feel like I'm going to be out of breath. I don't know why, I'm just walking. It is a lovely sunny day here in Oxford, and I am on my way to the Oxford Act for Palestine encampment. Gonna take you guys along with me, hopefully meet a few people there, hear about why they're there, what their demands are, and their thoughts on the responses to these encampments. So come along with me, I'll take you around the camp, and hopefully there'll be some stuff that you'll hear about how to show your support and get involved as well.
So would you mind just telling me what your name is?
Yeah, I'm Wilf. I've been here for the past few days.
And where are we?
We are right outside the Pitt Rivers Museum and the Oxford Natural History Museum in the Oxford Liberated Zone, where some roughly 200 community members, give or take a few, have come together to demand justice for Palestine and transparency from the university in their complicity in the ongoing crimes against the Palestinian people.
Yeah. And why are you in particular here? Why do you think it's important that you're here?
I think it's important to be here, and I think it's important to me that I'm here particularly because there is no greater issue in this world, in my opinion, than truly bringing an end to colonialism. We've seen the sort of post-colonialism of the 20th century has not really ended these oppressive structures which have existed in one form or another for the past 500 years. And this kind of genocidal violence which springs forth from these structures is their inevitable byproduct and shows the importance and the urgency of bringing them to an end.
And we're here on, is it May the 10th? I think we're here.
I believe so, yes.
Do you want to share a little bit about how this came together?
Yeah. The way this came together was that a lot of us had seen what had happened in the US with Columbia and with UCLA, where both police and sort of police-sanctioned violence police violence in the case of Colombia, and then police-sanctioned mob violence in the case of UCLA, were brought to bear against people demanding the ability for Palestinians to live in peace. And not even that, not even anything as radical in the US context as that, but demanding that their universities no longer be complicit in a genocide. And the level of repression that we saw was sickening. And it became apparent to, I think, everyone here that we had to show our colleagues across the sea that they did not stand alone, just like the people in Rafah, in Gaza, in Palestine, don't stand alone. And so that was the germ that sprouted this encampment.
Yeah, and I think across a lot of the media, we have seen a lot of rhetoric about kind of the hatefulness and violence of these camps, and you've just shown me around, and you've shown me the wellbeing tent, the library, the wall. What would you say about that kind of rhetoric that's being parroted around?
I mean, I think it's ridiculous. It's two things, really. Well, three. One, it's a lie. There has been no violence here. I think the most violent incident, honestly, was I tripped and almost sprained my ankle the other day. But you won't see that in the sun, of course. It's complete nonsense. It's a distraction as well from the ongoing violence in Gaza, in Rafah. The level of sheer projection, which is the third thing it is sickening. It's a complete misdirection on the part of, in this case, on the part of Rishi Sunak and a lot of the right-wing British press who have defamed us as violent or as anti-Semitic, which is simply not the case. On the latter point, on the point of anti-Semitism, a large number of our comrades here are Jewish. I showed you the apartheid wall earlier, which was covered in supportive slogans in Yiddish and in Hebrew, demanding the right to no longer have these atrocities committed in the name of the Jewish people, which is, I think, a completely overlooked and intentionally overlooked factor in these protests, because it doesn't serve the narrative that right-wing media wants to push.
Yeah, and I think probably, we're in Oxford, it's an Oxford University camp, and, you yourself are, I'm assuming, American based on your accent.
Alaskan, so give or take.
Oh yeah, there you go. And I'm imagining a lot of the response to this is going to be, well, these are just privileged kids who are kind of, taking their parents' money and wasting it, and What would you say to that sort of allegation?
Putting aside the fact that isn't true, we've got people from all walks of life. We've got people who are here on very generous scholarships. We've got people here who have experienced homelessness in the past. We've got people here who have experienced every level of disprivilege, of suffering which the system has been able to enact against people in the imperial core. But putting aside the fact that this accusation is factually incorrect, even if it were the case that people of privilege were using that privilege to speak out for the less fortunate, isn't that exactly what we want them to do? When you think about people take the civil rights movement in America, when you think about people then who were standing side by side, marching with Dr. King, white people specifically, people who were beneficiaries of the system, using that privilege to fight against it, isn't that exactly the moral imperative? That is, if privilege, which is itself, the existence of it is a crime, but using it to dismantle the system which produces it is the only thing that can be done, the only thing that should be done.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And what would you say to kind of the risks of being here? We're talking, and you've covered your face, and we've seen the absolute horrendous violence that's faced. People in America are doing this exact same thing. Yeah, what is your thoughts about that?
Well, there are a couple of things. I think there is sort of an inherent risk, both from police violence, from doxing. We had GB News in yesterday who are being very pushy and sort of getting in people's faces. And we don't want any of our more vulnerable comrades to be doxed and sort of have potentially have their lives ruined for fighting for justice. On the side of physical violence, we are lucky in that we have not yet seen in the UK the level of state repression and fascistic mob violence that the US has been suffering. But there is always that risk. There is always the risk of physical harm, whether it's from the state or from non-state actors. And it's an ever-present danger that we have to be aware of. And back to the point about privilege, we in our day-to-day lives as Oxford students or as members of the Oxford community, we suffer a very, very low level of risk. When we compare the risk that we're taking on now, which is, maybe 100 times higher than we would be undertaking in a normal day, it still pales in comparison to the people of Rafah who are experiencing conditions that none of us here could possibly imagine. It's the level of risk is just part of it, I think. It's just a necessary aspect of undertaking something dangerous for the right cause. And I do think also that, well, actually, I've completely lost my other point. Sorry.
It's okay. You're totally fine. And what has the response been from the community?
Mm-hmm. From the community, we actually had quite a bit of support. I mean, yesterday I was talking to this mother pushing what's the British word for a pram? Yes, thank you. Who, stopped at the fence and was taking pictures. I just wanted to make sure that everything was okay. I didn't figure that somebody pushing a pram would be acting with malicious intent, but you can never be too sure. And I went over and had a little, maybe 15-minute chat with her about what was going on, and the level of just joy that we were able to share in that conversation was one of the best parts of my day yesterday. And that's the kind of thing that has been happening with a great regularity here. And not to mention, even on a sort of more transigent level, when people go by and honk their horns in support, or on Instagram or Twitter when we see people from around the world pouring out support, it's been very heartening. But nothing has been nearly as heartening to me, and I think to many of us, as seeing people from Palestine commenting and expressing that what we are doing is meaningful to them. Because this is the other point that I had forgotten earlier about the masks, is that I think it's important that we all know that this is for the people of Palestine. None of us want to be famous. None of us want really to be thanked. At the end of the day, this is not about us. Egoism has no place here. This is first and foremost and finally a movement for the people of Gaza, for the people of Palestine. And the fact that despite that, people in Palestine and in Gaza have taken time out of their days, out of their harrowing days, to express gratitude to us, when we're having like an arts and crafts meeting later. It's really not the idea that they would be thanking us it boggles the mind. And that provides a level of surety that we are moving in the right direction, that we are doing something necessary and worthwhile that nothing else could.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're here to really get a response from the university, and you have demands of the university. Do you want to talk me through, first of all, what your demands are?
Yeah, so our demands are, let me see if I can remember the way they're enumerated. Disclose their divestments, because the university has a very sort of shady investment style where nothing is really public. And of course, given Oxford's very decentralized nature, there are a lot of nooks and crannies to hide away shady business. And so we're demanding that they disclose their investments and make public where they are putting our money. Secondly, we are demanding that they divest from companies complicit in genocide, because we do not want our money to be funding this great evil of our day. Thirdly, we are demanding that they reform their investment policy, because as it stands, they have a nominal ban against investing in arms manufacturers directly. However, they can invest in companies which themselves invest in arms manufacturers and sort of get around it that way. What? Fourthly, I believe is... sorry, I've got I've got the numbers all mixed up a little bit.
I was looking at them earlier, so I can get them off my phone.
Sorry, here we go. Yes, disclosure, divestment, overhaul investment property, policy, rather. Fourth is to boycott institutional relationships, so ending relationships with universities in Israel complicit in the genocide of Palestinians, and severing those ties of academic complicity. Fifthly, we are demanding that they drop Berkeley's in light of Berkeley's extensive investments in companies supplying Israel with weapons and military technology. And sixthly, and I think this is particularly important, is we are demanding that they that they aid in the rebuilding and reinvestment of both physical and academic capital for the people of Gaza. That means both providing places for Palestinian students here and encouraging connections with, for example, universities in our sister city of Ramallah, which is, I don't know if people know this, but a twin city with Oxford, and also materially investing in the physical construction of Palestinian universities, because the Israeli onslaught has leveled all of the universities in Gaza. There are no universities left there, and we are demanding that Oxford help in reversing the scholasticide, because it is the least they can do in light of their complicity in continuing it.
Yeah. And have you had any response from the university at all?
As far as I'm aware, they have been playing it very quiet. We are hoping to get a response out of them soon, but we have not yet, as far as I know, received one.
No. And is the plan to just stick it out until you get something?
I think we will be here as long as it takes. What could be more important than this? We can write our theses from here. We can study for exams from here. At the end of the day, this is more important than any of that. And I believe the common sentiment, and certainly my sentiment, is that we will be here as long as it takes, and we will be heard by the university. They can hear us now, or they can delay and stick their heads in the sand and continue bloodying their hands, but eventually they will respond to us.
And you would say that I hope that you identify as a Christian.
Yes.
So talk to me a bit about why it's important for you as a Christian to be here.
Well, I think that if we're being completely blunt, a lot of Christianity today has been co-opted by nefarious, sort of right-wing interests. We've got a lot of evangelicals in the States, especially, who are interested in blurring the line between fascism and Christianity. The idea is very much present that to be a good Christian, you have to believe in these terrible ideas. And I think it is critical for anyone of conscience who believes in Christianity, who considers themselves a Christian, to dedicate their lives to the fight for what's right. Not only because it is right, but because if we are to be known by our fruits, what have been the fruits of Christianity in the last 50 years? Because they've been tasting pretty sour, I think, for much of the world. And we need, if our faith is to remain alive, we need to fight to make it living again. We need to fight to make it about radical love and radical justice again, because it hasn't been for a lot of people in the last few decades. And even there have always been elements of it which have been contorted to the aims of various states, but I think now is probably the time to which it has been most completely co-opted.
I think many Christians have often been brought up with Zionism is the only only reasonable belief system that a Christian
Mm-hmm.
can have, and I expect a lot of people, you know, how many months in are we?
7, I think.
7 months into this are hopefully beginning to, or have been
Yeah.
questioning that belief. What would you want to say to those people?
Well, I think, so I do speak a little bit of Hebrew, and I can kind of understand where this comes from a very literalist sort of biblical interpret. There are these verses that are, you know, he who blesses Israel, I will bless him, and he who curses Israel, I will curse him, this kind of thing. And a lot of people from today's perspective don't really differentiate between the ideas of state and nation and group of people and religion, especially when it comes to Zionism. So when people set out to support Israel, they think it is this religiously mandated thing, even ignoring sort of these dominionist elements that are more eschatological in nature. There's this idea that it is religiously mandated, which is just not true. In Hebrew, the way to refer to Israel, the state, is Medina Yisrael, which is completely differentiated in theological and even linguistic terms from something like Eretz Yisrael, which is the land of Israel in sort of a geographical sense, the Holy Land, so to speak. And of course completely differentiated from Am Yisrael, which is the people of Israel. And all of these concepts are not very well differentiated in the public consciousness. And so it becomes this default position based on faulty premises. Yeah.
No. And one final question, because we've been going on for quite long. To people who want to support this cause, other kind of, just generally support Palestinian people right now, what would you say to people who do?
I would say that in the West, in sort of these countries of the American sphere of influence, the number one thing we can do is to be out in the streets, to demand by demonstration, by encampment, by show of numbers, that these imperial forces which have caused this genocide and are carrying out this genocide can no longer stand. Because we've seen the failure of electoral politics in this. We've seen that there is no one really, with maybe one or two exceptions, in the US Congress or in British Parliament with anything approaching a conscience on this. There is no one really who will be doing the right thing just out of the goodness of their heart. We need to show them that the people united demand an end to these things. The time has passed for asking. We must now state our demands.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
So do you want to start by telling me your name and where we are?
My name is Amy Tess, and we are at the Oxford Action for Palestine encampment in Oxford. It's a sunny day, and we've got around, I would say, 60 tents pitched right now, so it's a pretty busy space.
Why do you think, as a Christian, it's important to be here showing solidarity?
Yeah, for two reasons. I mean, one is obviously that being a Christian and showing solidarity is just part of the faith. I think we're all very aware, and I'm sure the listeners of this podcast are aware that that's, like liberation theology is just so important to me personally. And to be a proper Christian, I think we ought to be fighting for justice on this earth. But I also think that Christians hold a particular responsibility to stand for Palestine, given the way that Christianity has led to the current situation in Palestine, right? Whether it's the evangelical Christians in the United States who have actively and aggressively pushed for the Zionist project, or whether it's the Coptic Orthodox Christians in Egypt, of which I am one, who have happily supported, a leader in Egypt who is not as tough on Israel as he should be. Islamophobia has been a serious problem in the Christian faith, and so we have an obligation to stand up. Yeah.
And talk to me about the vibe we're seeing at the camp today, because there's been so much rhetoric about, I don't know, these sort of encampments being violent and hateful and things like that. So do you want to tell me maybe just the schedule of what's on at the camp today?
Yes. So what's on at the camp today? This morning we had a Gaza update. So every morning we try to update people on the news of what's coming out of Gaza and Rafah. Then we had breakfast at 10 a.m. We had a community check-in where we talked about our mental health and how we want to deal with various chores in the camp. We had a Palestine 101 session where one of our dear friends was just teaching folks about history. And then I believe later we're doing an arts thing, ? There's events throughout the day, but surely none of them are too violent. But I will also say on the point about, violence in the camp or like just agitators, this sort of thing, while we are an extremely like nonviolent and peaceful protest, I'm always really, really hesitant when folks emphasize that in a way that like I think throws resistance under the bus. And so for us right now, we're absolutely and deliberately choosing this like nonviolent approach, but I've been so wary of how the media has framed what does and does not constitute violence, right? Being more concerned about violence on property than they are about real lives. So that's something I've been trying to keep in mind as well when we're talking about our aims. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just talking about what's going on at the camp, I believe there's a bake sale happening as we speak.
Oh, great! I should have said that.
Well, there you go.
There's a Juma prayer actually happening a little bit. So a lot of the Muslims in town are going to come and do Friday prayer here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What would you say to kind of the risks involved of being part of a camp here?
Yeah, the risks of being involved in this camp, I think, have yet to play out. I mean, what we've seen in the U.S., unfortunately, is an incredibly militarized police force that has been enacting, physical and psychological violence onto folks for participating, but also severe doxing campaigns, suspensions, that sort of thing. We're starting to see that here in the UK, not the police side of it, but the administrative responses. I've just heard that a Palestinian student in Manchester has had their visa revoked this morning or yesterday, and we're obviously seeing that the Prime Minister has been calling vice chancellors down to Westminster to discuss this issue of terrorist support on college campuses. So I think students are very aware of the fact that their faces could be used in certain ways and that their careers could be in jeopardy. And for those of us on visas, that's a serious concern as well. Yeah.
And I think a lot of the rhetoric also, particularly about this being an Oxford University related encampment, is the idea of, you're all just privileged kids who are kind of wasting their parents' money by not going to university, not doing your studies. What would your response be to that rhetoric?
I agree. We are 100% privileged kids, which is why we're doing this protest. We are not doing this protest at Oxford to exceptionalize Oxford as if we are somehow better. We're doing it to shed light on the fact that Oxford is exceptional for a specific reason. It is exceptional in how it has accumulated wealth through colonization. It is exceptional in how it continues to propel that, both through its language and through its money. And so we feel absolutely the moral obligation to act because we are privileged by being part of this institution. So that's part of it. But the other is that I don't really see the purpose in paying tuition to get an education if you're not going to use it. And I don't really see the point in using an education in any way that doesn't make the world better. So while it is true that our exams and our theses might be suffering as a result of this encampment, I think it's very much working towards our education, yeah.
And if you could sit in a room with the relevant players at Oxford University, what would you want to say to them?
To be completely honest, we've been sitting in rooms with them for quite a few months now, and we've said everything we'd like to say. I don't know that appealing to the administration at Oxford through morals is the way that we're going to get to them at this point. They are viscerally aware of what's going on in Gaza. They are, obviously devastated by the loss of life, and yet they refuse to have the spine to really do anything about it in a way that hurts them. So to us, anytime that we will be sitting at the table with the administration, we will be negotiating, but we will be negotiating from a place of the power that we build outside camp. I'm no longer particularly interested in appealing to their sense of morality, unfortunately.
Because you said you've been involved in Palestinian activism on campus for a while.
Yeah, long before October, too.
A last resort of that activism?
I wouldn't say a last resort. I would say it's a next step resort. What comes after this is, unclear. But absolutely, it's a result of the fact that people are fed up. And the way that this encampment has swelled in the last few days is proof of how fed up people are with the fact that they have been protesting for 7 months and don't really feel like their demands have been listened to, both by the Oxford administration and by the UK government, right? You're seeing record numbers of people protesting in London, but marching in the streets every day is clearly not cutting it. So when we saw the encampments go up in the US, we really, really wanted to follow suit and join this movement of global solidarity to escalate and to be more disruptive. And if that's not sufficient, then we'll find other ways to be disruptive. But we definitely are trying to take next steps. Yeah.
No. And last question, to people listening who want to show their support, what would your recommendations be for them?
Follow us on social media, please. It's at OxAct4Pal on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I'm sure it'll be in the podcast description. On there, we're posting all about, the resources that we might need on any given day, donations, that sort of thing. But also, ultimately, it's not about our encampment. Like, this is about what's going on in Gaza and in Rafah. And so wherever you are in the world, please, 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 please show up on the streets. Please donate where you can. Please educate where you can, because we're trying to redirect all eyes that way. Yeah.
I am here with my lovely friend Esther, having a wander around the Oxford Palestine encampment. There is a bake sale happening right in front of me, which is just so sweet. And we arrived, we were shown around the encampment. There was a talk going on, which is a kind of 101 Palestine talk, going through the history. They've been doing it for the last 5 days. We were shown the wall to stop apartheid, where we left a little message saying blessed are the peacemakers. We were shown the library that they have here, the food tent, the media tent, the well-being tent, the first aid tent. In fact, we were shown the patch of the encampment where they are laying down tarps to protect the grass, because it is still really muddy, and just walking over chunks of plywood and crates to make sure they protect the grass. It's almost a festival vibe here. People are wandering around laughing. There's always on the move. Amy Tess, who I was just interviewing, was pulled away just after I got her photo to give a quote for the Times. It is just such a vibrant atmosphere, and there's a mother with her children holding a Palestinian flag and a pram just walking past, and people are really here for justice. The energy is high, and there is a real sense of hope and recognition that they need to be here. This was a clear next step for this protest, and yeah, it's boiling hot and they're in tents, and yeah, it is such an amazing atmosphere. And if you would like to support, we will have all of the details for the social media accounts, platforms in our bio. And yeah, free Palestine and support your local protest where you can.
Divest! We will not stop, we will not rest. This close! Divest! We will not stop, we will not rest.
So that was some people from the Gaza Solidarity encampment. You can find them on Instagram at Oxford Pal. And I'm sure there are a number of solidarity encampments that have sprung up across the UK, so do have a look, see if there's any way you can show support. I know that a lot of them are needing things like, sandbags as the weather is getting worse, and plywood to be able to walk and protect the grass, and anything from food and water and things like that. So do have a look, see if there's any in your area that you can support. You can also find the Oxford Palestinian Solidarity campaign at Oxford PSC1 on Instagram, and I'm sure there are others in your area as well that you can look into. As I said before, if you are listening to this episode before the 18th of May, do see if there's a demonstration you can join commemorating Nakba Day in your area or somewhere you can get to. And yeah, keep showing up for Palestine. You can find Big Christianity at bigchristianity.co.uk. We are, I believe, at Big Christianity on Instagram. I hope so. This is why I don't do the outro. To be fair, I'm pretty close to what Shanti does anyway. And yeah, we've got a couple of cool episodes coming up on deconstruction, where we have a bunch of people checking in and just sharing their thoughts on their own deconstruction journeys. So if you have thoughts on your own deconstruction or why you haven't deconstructed maybe, and wanted to share that, feel free to get in touch, drop us a message, drop us a voice note, and that would be great. Tell us about what you think you gained from your deconstruction, and also what you may have lost from your deconstruction. And we would love to share some more of those thoughts when they are out in the next few weeks. Thank you so much for listening. We're going to close with some more of those village names that were destroyed in the Nakba. As always, free Palestine. Keep showing up, keep showing your support, and keep them in your prayers. Hope you're having, or have had, or are looking to have a very good day. Bye.
خربت صير، خربت عزبة، خربت عسلة، خربت راس عطية، خربت ياما، خربت زكور، خربت فريش، خربت الغزلات، خربت الحفاظة، تبصر، طيرة المثلث، زنابة، طيرة المثلث، مخيم طول كرم، ام خالد، وادي الحوارث، وادي قباني، خربت الزيارة.